So I'm here with Vincent Sneed. Vincent, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm a music educator in the United States. I've been teaching in public schools for the last 21 years, all in the state of Georgia. Primarily, I taught to band. Instrumental has been my specialty. Piano is my primary instrument. And I've also taught chorus. I taught a little bit of elementary, younger kids. And now I'm currently teaching piano, music theory, music history to students at the high school level.
And this is your first time at Classical Next in Berlin.
Yes, it is.
And perhaps you can tell us a little bit about why you're here and the fascinating talk that you've just given us.
So in the United States, there is a very powerful culture in the United States. And we tend to look at ourselves as being um, exceptionalist. So we are American culture, we are this, we are that. And sometimes we tend to neglect the fact that there are cultures everywhere else. And so one of the things that I was looking for and coming to a conference was a conference where people come together from all over the world, from North America, but also from places like South America and Asia, come together and we, as musicians, and we talk about and we discuss and we learn, we enhance, we listen, and we learn about each other. And coming here was important for me so that I could present as well about how classical music is not just European, in the same way American music is not just American, and be able to take this kind of concept out to the world so that we can bring unity. I'm a firm believer that the arts brings unity to everyone,
Mm.
and being able to come here and be able to meet with people and learn from people and hear their experiences, listen to their music, and be able to present has been a big part of that for me.
Mm. So the title of your talk was Why Classical Music is Not Just European. And it was fascinating that you combine that you start with Pythagoras and you say how Pythagoras is the founder of Western harmony, and the next step was sort of rock and roll. But I mean, it could be seen as quite a provocative way of approaching the subject, but perhaps you can explain a little bit more how you made these connections.
So the big thing, when you look at a map of Europe and you see that right below Europe is Africa, right over to the east of Europe is the Middle East, there's Asia there, you realize that Europe is not isolated. And we can even look at the Roman Empire. We can look at all of these European empires that were in contact with people all around them. And so people like Pythagoras, for an example, he spent time in Egypt and he learned a lot of his mathematical things and his philosophical things from Egypt. And he brought those things back to Europe. And learning that as an example starts with the ancient world, but we can see these type of trends all the way up through modern times, where the Europeans were fascinated by different cultures. They took those cultures and integrated them into their own society. And sometimes we forget this history. We forget how those things came from other places. And so my presentation and what I feel is my responsibility is to bring that to the rest of the world, for us to be able to see that we're more connected with things like classical music than people even realize we are.
Mm. And you made, I think, a very interesting point about the fact that musical instruments that we tend to very associate as being European classical musical instruments, or not just classical, but that they go far deeper. They have much more historic than we believe. I think you gave the example like the saxophone, and I mean, there's lots of instruments, aren't there, where you can explain that.
Yeah, it's really difficult to name any instrument that at least is very well known that has its origins in Europe.
Mm.
If you do an internet search and you look up something like the clarinet or the saxophone, it's going to say this it's a European instrument. But the origins of the instrument go back much further, and they're usually outside of Europe. So the saxophone, clarinet, oboe, bassoon, they use reeds. And the reeded instrument goes back to the Middle East, for an example. All the percussion instruments come from outside of Europe. All of these things are instruments that infiltrated Europe during the Middle Ages into the Renaissance. And it was a spark that helped Europe to begin to take off with the things that came later with Mozart and Bach and Beethoven, but it had its origins from outside of there. And so that's why I brought up the question of the saxophone, because it was invented by Adolf Sax.
Mm.
People would say, well, obviously that's a European instrument, but it's the reed that's the most important part that gives you a sound of saxophone.
Mm. And you did a TED Talk back a couple of years ago. Can you tell us a little bit what the subject was of your TED Talk?
So it's a very similar type of subject. So we tend to look at our society as us and them. Especially we use the terms Western and Eastern. There's the West and then there's the rest. There's the West and there's the East. And my TED Talk was to basically say that that's not true. That our cultures are connected. We're a tapestry. We're a stitchwork. And when you look at things like music, you can see how those stitches come together. You can see how things like music of the spheres that we attribute to the ancient Greeks actually was Chinese. We can see even from outside of music and things like the numbers that we use, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, those are Indian. The Arabs take them, and then it comes into Europe. And so our cultures are not Western and Eastern. It's not this split. It's not this division. We're connected. We're a tapestry. And when we realize that, we can bring more unity to our society, more unity to our world.
And boy, we need a bit more unity right now,
Yes.
I would say. And the other thing I was really struck in your talk is that you repeated several times that classical music is world music. Which I fully agree with, but perhaps you would just like to explain a bit why you said this in your talk?
Yeah, I would always think about how in the curriculum in the United States, for an example, we will have classes that are called this particular type of classical music or this or that, but everything else in the world is just called world music. So we're going to take everything else from China to India to South America. We're going to put all of that into one class, but we're going to have several classes of classical music. And so I said, but Europe is in the world. It's a part of the world. And the music that comes from Europe has influences from around the world. So this music from the Baroque and the Renaissance and the Romantic era and the Classic era, all of it is world music too. And we have to treat it that way. We have to talk about classical music being world music the same way we would talk about Indonesian music being Indonesian music as world music. And so it's breaking down the barrier of feeling like that Europe is a different type of thing. It's a part of the tapestry of music that's across the world. And when we treat it that way, once again, we start to see and we start to teach musicians and people in general that we are not all that different from each other.
I think that's wonderful. And I think maybe given the state of the world, but how do you feel about the state of the classical music industry itself? Do you feel positive that the people are looking to change and how it's perceived?
I think the youth are. I think people in their 30s and younger are really looking to change it. The symphony orchestra in my state of Georgia, in Atlanta, they do a lot of collaboration. So they collaborate with hip hop artists and all kinds of things that bring young people to see it. And so I try to caution people, you have to be careful when you look into the audience of a classical music performance and you see a lot of gray haired people come in. We have to have, in order to keep the industry going, we really have to have more youth. And I think those kind of collaborations and showing people that all music is art. All music's art. So if we have a collaboration with a country music artist and a symphony orchestra, that's art, even if it's different than what we're accustomed to. That's how new music comes about. It's how new eras come about, new genres come about, is when we take things and say, why not try this? Why not do that? And I think that will create a better future for the state of classical music in the industry.
I'm glad that you sound positive about it. So thank you very much, Vincent, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.